Welcome to our Blue Margin Expert Insight series. We're glad you joined us. This series is for private equity and mid-market executives who want to increase enterprise value by using their data more effectively. I'm Blue Margin co-founder John Thompson, and today I'm speaking with Kison Patel, founder and CEO of Deal Room and M&A Science. M&A Science is a community of forward-thinking M&A practitioners on a mission to perfect the M&A practice. They host virtual roundtables, an annual summit, and a popular podcast with over 50,000 users, which we'll link to in the show notes. Under the M&A umbrella, the firm hosts Deal Room, which is an M&A lifecycle management platform software, Academy, which provides M&A training, Flex Talent, a fractional talent service, and firmroom.com, a self-service virtual data room platform designed to streamline deal management. Their clients include Pfizer, JP Morgan, and Deloitte. Kison laid the foundation for M&A Science in 2011 with his Deal Room software. He later wrote the book Agile M&A, which lays out an agile framework for M&A execution. Prior to both, Kison was a member of the Forbes Technology Council and a partner at Transatlantic Investment and Advisory, a boutique M&A firm. It's great to have you here today, Kison.
Hey, nice to have the time to chat with you today, John.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to bridge the gap between M&A, data, and private equity throughout. But to begin with, maybe you could give us a first-person overview of your career and how you came to be a leader in the M&A space.
Yeah, I'm still figuring that out sometimes. It was very grassroots, to say the least. I came out of a situation basically getting discharged from my undergrad program for academic deficiency. So, at least to say, instead of dropping out of school, I failed out of school and wound up working in residential real estate. Liked what it was, big transactions, but didn't like the intricacies of being more of an emotional sale than a financial sale. Somehow wound up meeting two gentlemen that were starting their own little boutique M&A advisory practice. And one of the things that they generated was a lot of leads online, and just wanted some help taking a lot of these opportunities. And that's how I got my foot in the door. Worked with that firm for a year, felt that this is easy enough, I can go do it myself. Started up a practice and ran it for 9 years, where from the bottom, worked on small, crappy transactions, and working with larger enterprises, starting the hospitality space with Kimpton Hotels, Extended Stay, La Quinta, and some of the developers of boutique hotels in the Chicago area. And then ended up working in FIG with regional banks like First Bank, Wintrust on buy-side acquisition, then also representing small community banks on the sell side. So built that foundation of familiarity with the M&A industry. Then the recession happened in 2007 and things got flipped upside down, which those of us know. And that's where I had an opportunity to pivot careers and ended up doing a tech startup that failed absolutely miserably. But there's a lot of good, I don't know if I got good operating lessons from it, but I was very intrigued in the way software engineers would utilize project management software to develop software. Thinking and reflecting on the M&A experience that I had, that why isn't there a project management tool for M&A? And that was the original inspiration to start a company, Deal Room, in 2012. And that took a whole series of iterations to get it to a point where, we ended up finding our ideal customer with corporates that are serial acquirers, acquiring 2 or more companies a year. And then over time, we've kept that same R&D process to discover problems, build solutions, and have expanded it into multiple products, educational products, the service offerings, and so forth that we have today to be more of a portfolio that can fully be comprehensive to support the M&A lifecycle.
That's great. I know you're in Europe. Is your home base Chicago?
It is. I'm Chicago-based. I travel a lot, and today I'm in Aalborg, Denmark.
But you grew up in?
I born in Chicago, grew up in small town Nebraska from the time I was about 3 years old until 19.
All right, I want to hear that story sometime. I'm heading to Chicago this weekend. Sorry to miss you.
Yeah.
One other sidebar question. I've seen your studio. It rivals those of network news, and you've got a huge following. How'd you end up with that studio? What was the evolution there? Just brief.
COVID. I remember I had a studio in the office, and I was so concerned that I was going to get locked out of the office that I took this condo as like an extra guest suite to entertain folks and whatnot. And I started setting up a podcast studio over there, but it became this COVID lockdown project, and I kept adding on and buying all this stuff from Amazon, returning 80% of it, keeping the good, and built a pretty elaborate podcast studio setup from that time to find an infectious hobby.
Yeah, so if you want a really good consultant to build a studio, Kison's got the time for that kind of stuff.
I don't know if I have the
let's
time, but
it's got the expertise.
yeah, I'll send you some templates.
Sounds good. So I guess my question is there really a science behind M&A or another take? Your book, Agile M&A, it adopts an agile methodology to the M&A process. Can you give us a quick take on what's unique about your philosophy and approach to the M&A process?
Everybody talks about the art of M&A, and I get it. I'm not denying it. There is a lot of art when it comes to M&A, and it's really hard lessons learned. You bump your head on the wall, you learn, and you do that from this experience. It gives you some unique ways of looking at deals and executing on it. But I think our industry truly lacks the science, the lessons learned, the real things that we could transfer to others and say, hey, why don't we standardize this? Why don't we know that these are certain things that you should look out for in a deal and approaches that you can take to make sure deals go smoother? And there is a strong common basis of that knowledge set that can be developed as a science so that us as teams, M&A teams, can execute on M&A with far greater results, building off of this sort of common known practice.
And is Agile a primary framework and theme throughout, or is that just one aspect?
It started with some conversations with a friend at Google, or became a friend at Google, and it turned to enough justification to create a book around how companies like Google and Atlassian use Agile practices. And it evolved into becoming an actual framework to say, hey, why not organize this into a framework so that other corporations can learn these practices and apply it and improve their practice. Hence, Agile M&A. A lot of it has commonalities with Agile when you think of software development because the fundamental challenge is very similar. You are dealing with a situation in your project managing based off a lot of assumptions, and that you want to create short cycles to validate your assumptions and be able to iteratively deliver value so that you can produce what the customer wants at the end of the day in a cost-effective, quick way. And I think M&A is really similar because when you buy a company, you don't know anything about it. You may think you do, but you really don't. And you will get really far and actually sign an LOI without actually knowing a lot about that company. So all this ingestion of information through the diligence process, if you can really take a project management approach to be very iterative, like have these deliverables in not only the diligence report, but just how we're going to integrate this company, how we're going to extract value out of it. That just is another really favorable approach. It's really similar to software development. You run an agile process, you're much more efficient, you're delivering way better results than the old school waterfall. And this Agile M&A is on the same track. If you're running an agile process, you're going to deliver far better results than the old school waterfall. A lot of the big four are susceptible of still using these practices. Not to knock on them, we still like them, and there's some good folks in those companies that we do partner with. But it's an emerging way of thinking about doing deals.
Yeah, I can see the analog to software development. You've got a bunch of developers out there. If they're each keeping their own notes on code and coming together and trying to coordinate and don't have a central way to coordinate and build on that everyone can access, it's impossible. With software, it doesn't work well. Is that what Deal Room manages, is bringing everyone together and building this ingestation of data and this growing analysis and vetting of assumptions so that it's in one place? Is that the deal?
Yeah, that's like the command and control system for running an M&A deal. You want to have one central place, single source of truth, and just something designed for running an M&A process. I've seen way too many deals cobbled up or utilizing Excel, email, series of PowerPoints cobbled together to run an M&A process. And
sorry to interrupt. Is that the characteristic, not naming any names or any of your partners or anything, but just at large, the, I guess, old style, more ad hoc approach? How do you characterize sort of that traditional approach to M&A? Is it one sort of senior guru with authority that oversees it and gets fed information and consults the oracle and says, let's do this deal? What does it look like when it's not organized and not done in an agile framework?
Oh, it's simple. If they're running it on Excel, that's pretty clear that that's a very old school way of doing M&A. If you're emailing an Excel tracker back and forth, this is 2023. You should see a therapist and get some help, because that is highly inefficient. And especially now, and I know we're going to talk about it, but like all these like BI solutions out there that really allow you to just see around the corner, see what's ahead, and you're still putting stuff in Excel where you don't really capture that. I mean, there's a lot of manual effort to do that, and you don't do it. But there's also a bunch of activity data in the way you interact and input the data that does not get captured at all. That when you do use a product designed to capture that information, to know people are working on what's the activity, like you can really get some broad, like a bigger peripheral on what's actually going on right now.
I'm curious about the market penetration, market reach of Deal Room. Are you guys the dominant platform? Can you just give folks a sense of that?
We started in 2012, and the way we look at the market is a lot of people are familiar with virtual data rooms, and there's a lot of them out there. It's probably $1 billion plus market cap size and very fragmented. We look at the other area as this emerging M&A management platforms that look at the broader life cycle of M&A, provide capabilities around pipeline management, the due diligence management, integration management, to give you that end-to-end capability of managing an M&A process. That we see small, like probably 50 million market cap, but growing quickly and taking some of the data room as well, because a lot of it has that similar capability. So that's how we.
So you're a pioneer.
We have a product called Firm Room that plays in the virtual data room space, and it's actually doing extremely well. It's just positioned to say, hey, here's all these data rooms. 80% of the market are these really old school data rooms that still bill you incrementally per page, which is something that was constructed in the late 90s when vendors would actually show up to your office with scanners and scan banker boxes of documents all day, and they would charge you per page. But now everything's in the cloud, and there's such like a minute incremental cost on the data storage. It doesn't really make sense to charge per page. So we put a product out there that was flat rate pricing, self-service, so you not actually interact with the sales rep to activate the service. So for us, it was a nice spin-off because we had the data room technology. We noticed a lot of the boutique firms, investment banks, law firms were looking for more of a data security solution. We were able to carve out, spin that solution out, make it into a self-service product that needed very little support. In fact, it's dubbed the world's most intuitive virtual data room. It uses the same base code, so we automated that. But that's worked out really well. So it's, we have a product that plays in there, in the big space, in a competitive space that's fragmented. But then Deal Room's been anchored in the M&A lifecycle management, which we do really well. I'm thinking we're set to take number one spot this next year.
Yeah, that's great. While we're on Firm Room, your virtual data room, part of our argument or our value proposition to the market is that if you've got clean, reliable data, you're able to ask it any question going into the sale process, the stuff that we do, that some of the challenges and intricacies and chaos of a data room are overcome. Do you see that need, or is the perfect data room good enough? What's your sense of the overlap, or I don't know, competitive conflict between really good BI platform, data lakehouse, and good reporting and ability to ask questions versus the data room at the exit, at the sale point?
I mean, can you bring them together?
Yeah, essentially pull the data from the BI system, add it to the data room, along with a bunch of other stuff from quality of earnings folks and so on.
Yeah, I think there's a way to find clean ways to start extracting data and putting it into a BI solution. Then you've got some interesting value there. I think at least it's the goal is to build a basis, right? We're creating performance metrics at the end of the day. We have certain things we want to track to know if things are going good or going bad, and where do we need to focus to make things keep going in the right direction. And there is, the data room gets a lot of data. There's, and it's based on what you're requesting too. You request the right data, you get the right data in there. It is static data, right? But it gives you a starting place. And sometimes you may want to find out as you progress in the deal how you're going to make that static data set into something dynamic. But I think at least it gets you thinking in the right direction on dialing in your performance metrics.
We're seeing still, I think, a slower PE deal flow, capital market deal flow. I think, although I've heard some bullish reports recently from a few PE partners, and financing's harder to come by. Leveraged loan levels are down lower than they were post the 2008 market crash, despite some signs this year in Q2 of a rebound. I'm curious how your M&A team is approaching this slower season, or if that's how you read the current market.
I would say it varies by industry. I can see a slowdown, like a nice, how we would think of a slowdown generally with a lot of the roll-ups out there. I think tech has probably had the more of the screeching halt moment with a lot of the activity, but we've seen healthcare pretty strong. Like healthcare is moving along and have really good multipliers at that as well. So it varies by industry for sure, but it is generally across the board slower.
Are your private equity clients looking at ways to maximize the upside of the downturn, and if so, how? Or is that not really an area you get into strategically with them?
You're always asking people what they're up to. And there is, when there is sort of, hey, we're not buying, then there are more on to cost cutting initiatives. It's how do you sort of trim the trees and, optimize or catch up on some of the integration work that got left behind, because there's a lot of value to capture when you integrate proper companies efficiently. We're finding it easier to get folks' attention and talk to them about their process and pain points and what they can do to improve. So that's been a good thing. Yeah, it's funny in a hot market. You think it's a good thing, but it's hard to keep improving in a hot market. Everybody's reactive to all the activity versus how do we make things better.
Yeah, the fat and happy versus the more hungry and strategic. Yeah, let's talk data for a second. From what I understand, part of your science is calculating the synergies of a given transaction for your clients, helping them to see economies of scale, improving their position in the market, opportunities to cross-pollinate client lists and products and so on. What role does data play in that process as you guys do your work?
There's data in the process of M&A itself, which, like activity data, for example, can give you a good sense of who's actually doing work, is the work getting done, essentially managing the details and making sure things get acted on. So data gives you insights in the process itself, essentially who's doing what, which allows you to manage the work getting done, manage the details, and make sure things are getting acted on. So in addition to getting that real view of the whole M&A process and how things are getting done, there's performance metrics we talked about earlier, and we have an investment thesis behind this deal and have identified value drivers. And that's where we want to start shaping these performance metrics. And those things iterate over time, and it becomes the driver of the company when it really gets operationalized with other performance metrics. But if they can shape them around what are these milestones we need to reach to assure that we're capturing that intended value of the deal, then that's the other key area of getting some of this information from the M&A process itself to start shaping what those performance metrics should look like.
I know yours is more of a platform, so whatever their data is, it is. But you also have extensive suite of services and professionals helping in these processes. Do you help a company clean up their data, augment their data before going into a transaction?
No, I'll go tell them to talk to you or somebody else. Yeah, I mean, we got a good tech stack. We do well at providing a tech stack. We have certain expertise in the network that are more of the senior level for that executive leadership on the front end or how you integrate the company. We have that, but in the product itself allows you to capture a lot of data. We build a lot of this into Google's Looker solution, and so have built our domain expertise around that specific. But if we look at data now, there's a lot of inoperability. So it doesn't really matter. Like the tool can be here and we can harvest a lot of M&A data in the product that we have specifically, but it can be mobile into other products. So if there's a company has more competency with Power BI or another solution, they can leverage that data. And this stuff better than I do, Jen. This is on your wheelhouse, but yeah, there's a lot. We could help collect a lot of this data, and then there's so many ways you can do it, but it just depends on what you're trying to do at the end of the day.
What I'm interested in is you've obviously seen a lot of transactions, and part of the premise of what we do is that the cleaner and more comprehensive your data is and organized so you can get the answers out quickly, facilitates faster sales at higher valuations. And that can't just be done at the 10-yard line. It's got to be done earlier. But having observed a lot of transactions, what is the impact of data on value, on speed of transaction? Is it everything? Is that the whole ball of wax and it's a silly question, or what role do you see it play in terms of facilitating successful transactions?
I think the clarity and goals is probably the biggest value. It helps you identify like where to focus when you got clear goals for your teams. At the end of the day, I think that's the thing that leads to the biggest issues when goals aren't clear. So if you can, so it's not just purely hoarding data, but just understanding how are you going to use that data, being able to prioritize it and distill it down to again get those performance metrics and saying, all right, here are the key things we're truly aligned. Like we're not just aligned at a single level, but we're aligned down to the level that's going to execute on this stuff. Then it'll make a difference.
Makes a difference. Any cases you've seen where data or lack thereof killed a deal or greatly diminished it?
I almost feel like, to me, to be honest, the friction point is the process of getting the data. When you're working on a deal and you feel like it's hard and pain in the ass to get the data, it starts souring the relationship. And I feel like that's what ends up triggering you not doing the deal. The more access you get, the more you can get your analysis and get comfortable doing the deal. Like things are good. You're happy. You're taken care of. You feel comfortable doing the deal. And we generally get along, can have a beer together, whatever it is. But I feel like that's the thing that causes friction point is when you don't want to share the data.
So wading a little deeper into the geeky end of the pool, the data lakehouse, and I know there's a lot of buzzwords out there, but data lakehouse really means something to those that build them. It's a model and architecture for a data platform for running a company that we've found to be ideal for speed and scale when ramping up a company's data capabilities. It's also less expensive than your traditional data warehouse, which has been a mainstay for Blue Margin and our industry counterparts for a long time. And until actually very recently, there's been a revolution in how efficient it is to build these systems and how scalable and so on. Interestingly, the data lakehouse, its greatest potential as a platform for enabling the power of AI analytics, generative analytics, is still sort of out for delivery. It's impending. I think it's going to come faster than we think. Microsoft did a pretty impressive demo in May of their Copilot product combined with Power BI, and just asking things like, which of my clients is most likely to churn? What happens if I adjust my pricing in this way or that way? And all sorts of very quick interactions. Generative analytics is analogous to ChatGPT, but with your numbers for your company. And it's hard to appreciate the potential if you haven't played with GPT. For myself, my brother came along one day and said, "What is it you're trying to do?" And it was a piece of research or an article or something. And he just started typing in loose prose to some machine genius on the other end of GPT what he wanted and who he was and how he was thinking about it. And it produced a piece of content that was mind-boggling. I have since worked with it more and more, and there's the opportunity to have successive prompts where you're digging deeper and deeper on a subject and adjusting the nuance. That same thing is coming to data for a company. The ability or I guess the potential for that kind of fluid insight and research and insight and analysis is hard to exaggerate. First of all, interim question: are you using ChatGPT much yourself?
Yeah, I do. I use it for a handful of things, like a lot of briefing documents. I actually the other day I had a draft investment thesis, and you prompt it so it prompts you back and said, "Hey, I'm going to build this investment thesis for this scenario type of deal. Feel free to ask me any questions you need to get there." And it gives you a good working. Then from there you can start editing things. So we found it really useful for a lot of that. And there's a couple of trips I took, John. I went and took a road trip in outside of Paris in the Champagne region, and I had ChatGPT plan the itinerary and almost stuck to it to the T. And then I also did a nice road trip over there in north of Boston along the coastline from Portland, Maine, down to Salem. ChatGPT planned the whole itinerary to the T. So those travel agents out there, I think they're going to take a hit pretty soon, because I find it better than anything else I've done.
It's pretty amazing, and you can actually feed into it. Here's who I am. Here's our company. Here's our position in the market. Here's the tone I like to use. Here's an example of my work. Here's generally the types of things I'm trying to communicate, just as background, so it can understand that persona. Translating that to analytics for a company, is your take on this impending generative analytics revolution that it's going to be a disruptor, that it's going to have a major impact? Do you have much of an opinion on it? What are your thoughts?
I acknowledge the fact that our industry moves slow. Like a lot of this stuff we'll see impacted in fast-moving industries first, like sales and marketing. When you look at M&A, it's a slow move. I mean, step one, get people off of Excel. And step two, we can look at AI. So I see a lag, like a 5-10 year lag for a lot of the cool things you'll see in other industries before it hits M&A. So acknowledge that. There's a lot of sensitivity. Like M&A, there's a lot of sensitivity around how data is exchanged and things of that sort. And we a lot of legal agreements around that. And there's things, how you use servers, that we have to disclaim the stuff to customers. So ultimately, like, we really want a lot of the AI activity or the processing to operate in a private instance environment where it's not on a public server. And this stuff is really expensive. So there's sort of that component, but there are solutions in play with all the big cloud service providers to provide this sort of AI stack in that kind of private instance contained environment. I think seeing that is like the data management component, but then there's maturity in the how you train these models and what they actually deliver, because it's not just plug and play with a general ChatGPT API, for example, where you're plugging into general solution. I think there's a lot of specific logic that applies to M&A that needs to be developed, or templates, and then we'll see some interesting things happen from there. I think even when you click into that, though, a lot of hypothetical ways of using AI for M&A. We get pitched at a lot of this stuff too. Our R&D and development cycle is driven through validation of use cases with the customer, and validating the demand so that we have a high level of confidence that if we build something, it will get used. And I think that's like that needs to really get fleshed out before you start seeing some rubber hit the road with AI in our industry. And two, I'll tell you the one thing. I'm just putting this out there from all these conversations. In M&A finance world, people, corporate finance, or people are hyper skeptical about AI. Like they are, more than any industry I know of, super skeptical. So that's the other big thing to consider. It's, even if just bringing that up, it's really very interesting. So I'm very pro AI, but I can tell you, like, this thing isn't going to be a game changer that soon. In the, I think, next 5 years, maybe in the 5 to 10 year period, it'll have an impact, as contrary to other industries where we're seeing some direct impact, especially those travel planners out there.
Yeah. Well, you can tolerate some variability when it comes to text, but you can't tolerate much when it comes to finance. So, and until we have artificial general intelligence, you won't be able to take, a generative AI engine, stick it on top of a data room and say, tell me everything. Because, those generative tools, they're looking at the likelihood of the next word based on the previous word and previous context and a bunch of stuff, based on a data set of the entire internet, versus looking at a data set for a specific company. You're not going to say the most likely number after a 6 is a 4. So you've got to have really good semantics to translate that data, something we're working on, the generative AI spec, so that companies can take advantage of that early rather than trying to catch up. And for us, it's a little more immediate, because the whole mandate when a company works with us is we need to be able to ask questions and get answers now of our data.
Have you looked at this with like roll-ups specifically? Because I would sense the more immediate use cases with these roll-ups, that like their process gets very templatized. It becomes very rinse and repeat, and you could build like templates and training AI to do specific things. Like, hey, I can distill this diligence summary report because it becomes a template. It's sort of the same things that you're extracting and summarizing. Can I sort of train it to do that as sort of a primary use case?
Yeah, I like that, because we have a lot of really sort of early adopter nerds around here. We've been looking at every generative analytics tool out there. There's none really that we feel we can say to clients, you'd be crazy not to get on this. They're still sort of beta, but I like that. That's a good suggestion, especially for a guy who knows how to branch to other areas of application within his industry. So appreciate it.
Well, I think there's a lot more data there. What it comes down to is you get so much more data to train a model. Like if you had a customer that does 1,500 acquisitions a year and they've like archived a couple of years of data, you got you got a lot of data to automate the shit out of that process, versus you work with a larger strategic and no two deals are remotely alike. It's just impossible to build any kind of useful templates there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Versus a platform company doing 12 acquisitions a year.
Yeah, and when we say template too, like with this AI, it's like this will do the work. You're just guiding it in a way that it could really do things in a specific way. It can write a full-on diligence findings report, and you could train it specifically, but you got to have that series of data sets to train it to do that. And that's the gap we see now. Because otherwise, you're going to get a bunch of generic answers. You can go on ChatGPT, ask it about M&A stuff all day. You get a lot of general responses. But if you wanted to really train it on how to actually do some things, you got to have that data set to train it on. And that's the thing who's giving that up in M&A today? Like nobody.
Right. Right. Yeah, interesting. So, how do folks engage with you, clients, and how can people connect with you otherwise, just to reach out?
LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn, connect me on LinkedIn, follow our company. We're always on there.
Yep, we'll put those in the show notes, and have enjoyed talking. Again, we've had a few chances in the past, but the first time recorded here. And really appreciate your perspective and sort of transparency, actually raw honesty about your process getting to where you're at, and about the M&A world, AI, and how it's going to mix there, or how long it'll be. So very helpful, and appreciate your time today, Kison.
Always fun to talk shop, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Talk soon.
Take care.